Is it calories in, calories out, or is it carbs and insulin? This is the great debate of the modern day when it comes to weight loss. Many people may not agree because a lot of people are like, well, obviously it's a calorie deficit. And others are like, no, it's not. And they have to go down this whole rabbit hole as to why the carbohydrate insulin is now disproving the fact that it's just calories in, calories out. So we're going to actually dive behind all the science we currently have, the updated science as of 2024, to go through and truly find out what matters when it comes to fat loss. And it is, to be fair, more than just calories in, calories out. But is it because it's carbs and insulin? Let's dive in. Keep in mind, all PMIDs related to any scientific literature that I'm describing here will be linked at the bottom of the description. And this is quite a bit to cover, so this will be a long video. You can skip ahead through the chapters down below if you wish. Let's go ahead and get started. First, just to quickly define the different models here: energy balance, carbohydrate, insulin. So energy balance being, of course, the one that's been more established, if you will. It's one that we've been using for a long time, which is reliant on calories as how we quantify the amount of energy in food or the amount of energy we are expending. A lot of people don't like this, proponents of this model, because they claim that the body doesn't run on calories. Calorie is actually a unit of measurement for a certain amount of heat. And so when we look at and we sort of run the numbers, if you will, body mass, our body mass, plus the macronutrients we intake in protein, carbs, and fats, all do correlate directly with ATP production to some degree, and that correlates to heat production and heat loss. So it turns out that using calories as a way to quantify energy input and output for humans is totally viable and relatively accurate. So we have the carbohydrate insulin model that wants to refute this. However, built into the model itself is something I think that people out there, let's face it, there's going to be some rants in here. A lot of people that are going for the carbohydrate insulin model oftentimes don't understand physiology. Not a lot of them, or not all of them, sorry. A lot of them don't understand physiology, and they saw another video on it, or they read a book on it, which we'll cover. So they don't understand certain things, and they may not understand as a result that what's baked into the carbohydrate insulin model is actually the energy balance model. So what the carbohydrate insulin model is, it was introduced a lot more recently, say in the last 50 years when this whole low carb diet became a thing. And at that time, it was basically, and up until now, the current updated hypothesis for it, if you will, produced by Ludwig and colleagues, shows or explains that it's actually in eating high amounts of dietary carbohydrates, especially processed carbohydrates, and in some cases fructose, which is where you're getting people saying fruit is bad for you, which has to be one of the most abominable statements to ever exist in the realm of health and fitness for humanity ever. Nonetheless, these types of things are increasing insulin secretion. And when you increase insulin secretion in the body, which is true, carbs do increase it for sure, the calories go towards fat tissue instead of towards lean tissue. And this causes higher hunger, higher appetite, and lower metabolism. So we see there that if your hunger goes up, you are more likely to do what? Eat more calories. If your metabolism goes down, that means you are burning less calories, which simply is accepting in the model itself that energy balance is ultimately what dictates the weight loss or weight gain scenario, but they are framing it in a sense that it's actually the carbs that cause people to overeat. It's not the overeating that inherently causes weight loss. It is what causes people to overeat inherently that is then causing weight loss. Okay? In this case, carbs obviously being sort of the enemy. So these are the models. And now when we look at what a lot of people claim as, well, this is why the carbohydrate insulin model is superior or is actually accurate, they don't ever cite any data at all. As far as I've seen, nobody cites any data. And that's probably because there isn't really any data to support it. There's interpretations of certain data that may support it. But as far as like any conclusive, clear outcomes, none whatsoever. It all has to be sort of, the goalpost has to be moved to try to make a case so far as to why the carbohydrate insulin model is in fact the leading cause and issue for weight gain, obesity, and difficulty of weight loss. So people will turn to books instead. There's plenty of books written on a bunch of bullshit, okay? And so there's plenty of books written on keto. Now fine, people have written books on why keto works for them and why it could work for you for weight loss, and it absolutely could. But then you've got books like Taubes' book in 2007 that he published called Good Calories, Bad Calories, which is directly attempting to support the carbohydrate insulin model, in which case he states what he says are 4 facts. And I put facts in air quotations for a very specific reason, but let's cover these 4 facts, which if I am somebody who doesn't look through data, hasn't been in the industry all that long, and has a cognitive bias towards the carbohydrate insulin model based on my experience, it becomes very easy to cherry pick these things and say, well, look, it says in this book, as if that actually matters. The book states 4 facts, quote unquote. Number 1, only carbohydrates cause insulin release. Number 2, insulin is singularly responsible for fat gain. Number 3, dietary carbohydrates are required to gain fat because, of course, if insulin is the only thing responsible for fat gain and only carbs increase insulin, then, of course, number 3 is that you have to eat carbs to gain fat. If you eat anything other than carbs, you can't gain fat, according to this. And type 2 diabetes and obesity, abnormal levels of insulin are found in said people. Now, the issue with this is we have at least 3 high-quality papers explaining the fact that this is not the case. In fact, they explain that fat gain can occur without dietary carbohydrate intake or without increasing insulin secretion beyond baseline levels to any substantial degree. So we've got a 2021 review, a 1999 study, and a 1998 study that has confirmed this for us so far. Okay, next we also see, furthermore, insulin secretion is determined by a variety of factors beyond dietary carbohydrates, essentially nullifying these quote-unquote facts here. Again, 3 high-quality papers, including 2 2021 reviews and a 2012 article. Now, I will also add that there was an organization that was put together almost entirely for the sake of conducting high-quality studies to help prove the thesis, the hypothesis of the carbohydrate insulin model, and that organization was called the Nutritional Science Initiative, the NUSI, if you will. And to their credit, they did actually recruit high quality and credible investigators to help conduct these studies. Unfortunately, based on the data they've accumulated through their own studies, nothing was able to conclusively come out with any data to support the carbohydrate insulin model. In fact, their first study that was done, I believe it's this 2016 clinical trial right here. I may be incorrect on that. I don't necessarily have it in the notes here, but nonetheless, we have, for instance, this 2016 clinical trial that showed that despite rapid, substantial, and persistent reductions in daily insulin secretion, after introducing the ketogenic diet, low-carb diet, we observed a slowing of body fat loss. Therefore, our data did not support the carbohydrate insulin model predictions of physiologically relevant increases in energy expenditure or greater body fat loss in response to an isocaloric ketogenic diet. However, it is possible that dietary carbohydrate restriction might result in decreased ad libitum energy intake. Ad libitum is to say on your own, at your own will's energy intake, a prediction of the carbohydrate insulin model that was not tested in the current study but deserved further investigation. So keep that in mind. They're basically saying, well, there is potential that eating lower carbs and therefore secreting less insulin will lead to less desire for eating more food in general. And that is the whole basis of the model, essentially, right? It's like, well, you're actually fat because you eat so many carbs, causing you to eat more because you want to eat more because of the insulin, right? Okay, well, we're about to find out if that's true. Now, we also have a 2020 meta-analysis, obviously meta-analysis being a very credible source of literature. And this one in particular, because it was of 121 eligible trials, 21,942 participants over a 1-year period, in which case, and I'll read it from here instead, okay, over 12 months, all weight loss and fat loss diminished across all diets. There were no large differences between any of them, and I quote from the researchers themselves, moderate certainty evidence shows that most macronutrient diets over 6 months result in modest weight loss and substantial improvements in cardiovascular risk factors, particularly blood pressure. At 12 months, the effects on weight reduction and improvements in cardiovascular risk factors largely disappear. Now we're going to move to a 2021 randomized control trial, which is regarded as probably the highest quality form of research that can be done. This was a 1-month inpatient study, and basically they found that a 2-week exposure to a high glycemic load diet, which means a higher carb diet, resulted in roughly a 700 calorie per day lower ad libitum energy intake and more body fat loss compared with the 2 weeks spent by the same participants on a very low glycemic diet. So quite literally, more carbs led to a lower ad libitum energy intake, which if you remember from here, they're saying, well, maybe it does have this benefit. Well, so far we're not seeing that benefit come to fruition. And they probably saw more body fat loss in the process as well. And we're going to finish with two more. We've got a 2017 review here that showed less insulin secretion was found in the lower carbohydrate group. Of course, that makes total sense, but more fat loss was seen in the fat loss group. So that doesn't exactly support the thesis here. Lastly, I do have an ancillary study on here that showed that lower satiety was actually reported in the low carb diet versus a moderate or high carb diet group. Slightly higher energy availability was shown for the low carb group in the blood postprandially. So this is the single thing so far out of all the literature I've been able to skim through, rather not even skim through, literally read through over the last couple of weeks of putting all this together. And it's that, hey, there's potentially slightly higher energy availability in the blood of the low carb group. But again, it was still relatively limited to determine for how long and how substantial the change this will actually elicit in the long term. So with that said, the best thing I would say that you can find for supporting and sort of accumulating all this data to put into one concise place that really talks about every single point and every single piece of data so far in one place is definitely the 2022 review known as the Energy Balance Model of Obesity Beyond Calories In and Out. And there's several statements here I've even written down. For example, the CIM predicts that lower carbohydrate diets, so CIM is the carbohydrate insulin model, predicts that lower carbohydrate diets decrease insulin, therefore mobilize fat from adipose tissue. However, here's the kicker. The energy balance model acknowledges the potential benefits of low carbohydrate and low glycemic load diets in managing body weight or cardiometabolic outcomes in some individuals. Precision nutrition initiatives have stemmed from a hypothesis of inherent biological heterogeneity when optimizing individuals' diets. So in other words, without boring you with just reading off a screen here, the point that they're making in this review is based on all the data and based on everything we're gathering and these approaches and hypothesis and what evidence we have so far, it's clear that the energy balance model actually accepts and agrees with the benefits that the insulin carbohydrate model is proposing as far as, yeah, you should probably eat less calorie-dense foods, processed sugars, eat those less often. And there will be benefits as far as adherence goes, as far as satiety goes, and all that type of stuff. But they're saying that your model does not encompass a holistic approach that can be found under the overall encompassing energy balance model, which means in some cases eating sugar is totally appropriate and fine and still losing body fat loss. And I have not only my own personal experience documented perfectly here on YouTube of me doing this, I still do it to this day whenever I'm on a cut and get as lean as I possibly want. And I have the anecdote of working with over 1,500 people in my coaching company that I ran for the better half of a decade to successful weight loss for people that struggle to do so, even the people that tried all this keto and stuff along the way. So the question is this, now that we got through the boring part here, which is the data and okay, what are we actually seeing here? It's quite clear that so far the carbohydrate insulin model is not being supported all that well or at all. We, of course, if you believe in science and data and all this, you don't say it's for sure false. You say, so far, everything's pointing to this. So if we are going to be scientifically accurate, well, we must understand that saying this is the way to go will help encompass more holistic approaches, and you're going to be more correct. Until then, we want to see data that actually backs up the carbohydrate insulin model, which basically nobody has produced as of yet. Though it's always possible for that to change. However, until then, the carbohydrate insulin model is simply not appropriate to replace the energy balance model. Now, with that said, why are people getting famous for pushing this carbohydrate insulin model and for, more importantly, demonizing the energy balance model and saying, listen, a calorie is not a calorie and counting calories is stupid and counting calories doesn't work? These individuals are marketers that either do know what they're doing or actually don't, and they are being driven by other forces that they don't even realize themselves, which is more likely to be the case because true reasonable people typically have higher moral compasses as well. So if somebody is simply not very reasonable or ignorant or doesn't have the data or doesn't care for the data or is more than happy to stay locked in their own belief system at whatever expense that may be, then those people are probably not doing it out of the bad intention necessarily. It's just causing bad results because of their lack of awareness of it, okay? So it's one of the two. Either the person that you're following that's getting famous, there's several of them, especially on TikTok, millions of followers, these guys, if they're getting famous for saying things that are not only blatantly false, but they never list any data whatsoever in specific PMIDs, like peer-researched study, peer-reviewed literature that's actually been published. Well, there was a study one time, and they just say a study and that's it. People believe them. Show the data. Why are you scared to show the data? Probably because you don't have the data, you don't understand how to read the data. And if you had the data and showed it, it would probably not work in your favor. So here's the reason why people love to fall for the low carb thing, and that's why it's popular to say, hey, it's not calories in, calories out, it's all carbs. Here's why. Number one, it's easier to understand and follow for the average population. That's just the reality of the matter. The average person wants fast and easy. They don't want the difficulties that come with calories in, calories out, and there are many, which we're going to discuss and hopefully give you some positive takeaways as well. So it's easy to understand and easy to follow. Now, the next one is it's very polarizing and gets attention very easily. That's actually why I started this video with the hook that I started with. I started the video by saying something very contrarian and very polarizing. I said, it's not calories in, calories out. You've been lied to. People love that stuff, as I'm going to get to next. And I did that, and then I flipped it and showed you, never mind, there's no fucking data to back that up. And so these individuals, these creators, become incentivized. They must solidify their identity with this model, which is unfortunate because they become inflexible with future positions they may take, which is why these people don't stay relevant for much more than a few years. Polarizing attracts attention. They are incentivized to continue spreading this information, misinformation, mind you. Next, cut carbs, saw weight loss must be the solution. This is the very simple, incompetent model of the famous creator that comes out saying absolute nonsense with no data to back it up, other than this is what I did and it worked for me. Okay, for those of us who have a little bit more experience and wisdom in the industry, we understand that, yes, you may have cut carbs after trying to track your calories and it worked for you. So what happens? You get excited and you think it's whatever, you might want to consider it the Dunning-Kruger effect. You think, oh, this is what the secret's been all along. And so you begin to develop a bias towards and only see the perspective. You jump into an echo chamber on TikTok and YouTube and so on that starts to reinforce these limited beliefs that you have based on flawed experiences or perceptions rather. So that is what people are doing. They think, no, I cut carbs and it works. No, it might have worked for you because it got you to eat less calories just in a way that you don't realize. It doesn't mean it's the end all be all. Next is yelling, screaming, and pitting us against the evil food industry. This is a classic. Everybody these days falls for it. And again, if we're being honest, developing a following on TikTok is very easy. Most of the people on there are brain dead for the most part, in the sense that they have no attention spans and they just fall for anything. They're like a gust in the wind. Speaking of which, I don't know if you can hear the wind right now against this thing. They're a gust in this wind. It just throws them left, right, and center. One day they believe one thing, the next day they believe another. They have no real solid standards for themselves, and so they'll believe anything that sounds appealing and sexy and makes them feel like they have a bigger purpose in life. In this case, also something else to blame. Yeah, that's right. It's the big food corporations and the stupid carbs that they put in my food. Did you choose to eat that food? Well, they put it in there anyways, and this, that, and the other. Come on, right? So anyways, that's a very important tactic to help gain popularity in something like TikTok. Next is they tried calorie counting, but they didn't do it properly, which leads to a broken belief system and understanding, which makes them vulnerable to misinformation. So anybody out there that says calorie counting doesn't work for them actually has never done calorie counting properly or consistently. And there's a few reasons why calorie counting is difficult and has some issues for a lot of people. And the first is the toughest one to swallow. It is the extreme level of detail and accountability most won't adhere to. I personally had a person, this woman in my DMs several years back when I was running this coaching company, and she was always DMing me asking, like, she wanted my help, but she was like, I really just don't want to track calories though. I said, listen, you don't have to track calories, but if you've tried everything else and it hasn't worked, it's very unlikely that we can really get you to do anything better than what you're doing now. I can give you a meal plan, but then what? You're going to be dependent on me forever? Just know if you're okay with that. No, I want to do this, blah, 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 but I don't want to track calories. And she would explain why. She's like, life is too short. I don't want to do it. It's blah, 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 right? So she's explaining she doesn't want to go through the extreme detail required, and she doesn't want the accountability of the fact that you can't just plug something into MyFitnessPal, grab a huge handful, and think that you're accurate. So that is the big struggle with most people. Guess where that person is today? Unfortunately, she's still stuck in the same thing. She went off and tried keto. She went off and tried this, that, and the other. She's still stuck in the same thing because eventually, if your priority is physique and health, There's no way around it. You're going to have to dial things in. Just like most people don't like the accuracy and consistency and the discipline and the accountability of tracking their finances to the penny. However, that's also the reason most people don't do it and aren't financially free. So there's patterns here that we have to be aware of, okay? Next is misunderstanding of a couple key things. The accuracy of tracking. So like I mentioned, they're putting a bunch of oil on their salad, but they only tracked the veggies in the salad. So the salad is, 150 calories. No, it's probably closer to 550 calories. And that's a point I'm going to make with this literature we have here. Metabolic adaptation. So people will get into a deficit, and for 3 weeks they see results, and then they stop seeing results, but they stick to the same meal plan for 3 more weeks. And they're like, oh, this doesn't work anymore. They don't realize that you have to continuously adjust your calories to stay in a deficit, as your body's going to reduce its maintenance level to ensure that you don't die. So you have to continuously adjust to stay in a deficit. So don't understand that part at all. Now here's the crazy thing. People underreport calories, and they also think that they have regular eating habits. This is the crazy thing, okay? So we've got a study that was done here as far as a bunch of things. By the way, I do want to mention, when it comes to carbs for maximizing muscle growth or retention, it's also suboptimal based on all the data we have currently as well. A 2018 randomized control trial and a 2021 randomized control trial both are showing less than ideal for increasing muscle mass versus a higher carb option, and less likely to sustain muscle mass or build it, but fat loss can occur. So in other words, for resting metabolic rate, which is an important thing if you want to burn fat and keep it off long term, the low carb is not really giving you the best way to go for that, okay? So I want to refer back to this study that basically showed that an underreported total intake by some cases of 50% for some people, and an overestimated energy expenditure by up to 75%. In other words, most people are underreporting because they think, oh, I only ate 1,500 calories, that's it. I get this I can't even tell you how many times I've experienced that, and they're probably eating closer to 3,000. That's the reality, the harsh reality. And they'll think, yeah, I exercise tons. I get 10,000 steps in an average day. They get 2,000. It's just that crazy. And here's even crazier. These people believe that they had genetic disorders. They took thyroid medications frequently as a result, and they described their eating habits as relatively normal. In other words, I've gotten to the point now where I understand that almost anyone that tells me, oh, I need help with my nutrition, my diet, this, that, and the other. And I say, okay, cool. How much protein are you eating, or how many calories in that? They say, well, they don't answer that. They just say, well, I eat pretty healthy. I already know that person is hopeless until they open their mind to understanding the fact that no. The fact that they think that they eat healthy and they're not seeing results is the first point of the issue. They're already too closed-minded. They're already thinking, well, I eat healthy. I don't need to make that big of a change. Surely it's just a little secret I need. That's already a losing mindset. They need to open up that mindset if they want any chance of succeeding and opening up to this. And lastly, they're trying to fit in too many calorie-dense foods in this day and age. Too many protein bars, protein shakes, greens, powders instead of actual vegetables. This isn't going to work. It's going to make sticking to a calorie deficit much harder. Okay. Now, to finish off here, the harsh truth and application. How do you apply this so you can get as lean as you possibly want? And again, go ahead and feel free to check out my channel to see all of my actual documented footage of me going through this process myself, like clockwork, getting ripped multiple times for photo shoots whenever I want. I'm doing it very shortly again soon. Very shortly again soon. I'm doing it again shortly, and I'll probably document it as well. So here's how we do it. The math and the lifestyle. Two components. The math. Your calorie intake matters, of course. We're tracking that with MyFitnessPal, for instance. Tracking it with MyFitnessPal, and you must be consistent and accurate. You can't track for 2 days, 1.5 days. That's what most people do. Yeah, I track calories 1.5 days, and they think they could just cruise from there. Doesn't work that way. Okay, don't forget, accountability. Next is output. How much are you burning? That's the mathematical equation we're looking at. Okay, based on all the data, it's very clear. Even the carbohydrate insulin model agrees. Activity and steps. If you can get a tracker like an Apple Watch, great. You can start to monitor that and see the consistency of the trends and the patterns more. Exercise, actual intentional exercise. How much are you doing? Are you consistent with it? And resting metabolic rate. The more muscle you build, the higher this is going to be. That's always helpful. And lastly, your weight. Are you actually measuring it daily, the way I recommend, and getting a weekly average with a free app on your phone? If you take care of this, the math is set. As far as nutrition, there's composition, right? Like right macros and all that. That comes to the lifestyle part. So this is the part that people think doesn't work because they're fucking this up. It's simple as that. Here are some of the factors, and then I'll wrap up. I know it's been a long video. Water and sleep. Most people, I tried calorie tracking, this, that, and the other, doesn't work. They sleep very inconsistently. That's going to reduce your chance of being able to stick to the math. Same with water. Dehydrated, not going to work in your favor. Next, nutritional understanding. They don't know the difference between calorie dense and nutrient dense foods and how different it actually is and why it matters, why vegetables are important. I know it's crazy to think. Most humans these days in the modern day, first world, don't know that vegetables are healthy and why. I know, mind blowing, but it's the reality. Habits and discipline. How good would you say the average person's habits and discipline is? Obviously garbage. So how are they expected to stick to this extreme level of detail and adhere to it and have this level of accountability? They can't. They need to ease their way into it. If you start with a meal plan, you jump into the Modern Physique Hub, what I offer to help you get as lean as you want, build as much muscle, improve your health. Link is down below if you want to join. $1.56 a day, the best rate on the internet, by the way. You join that, I'll get you set up with the right macros, calories, and a meal plan to get you started. Then from there, we can start integrating the right habits, discipline, and all that stuff along the way. Okay, preparation. Are these people meal prepping? Oftentimes not. It helps a ton. That's why I've been doing it for the last 10, 15 years. Because once you start doing it, you realize this is how you stay on top of things very easily. Take the thinking out of it. Next is consistency of meal timing. So if you're different meals all the time, some days you skip breakfast, some days you skip dinner, some days you skip all meals, like all this type of stuff, that's going to make it a lot harder also. Next is grocery habits. I mean, you're buying chocolate and donuts and all these things to keep in your cupboard for when you want it. I personally just don't even have any of that stuff in the house. A lot of people would think, well, it's a discipline issue, but I disagree. I don't see how a discipline issue is the issue when it's really just a choice of not having something that isn't beneficial to my nutrition and health long term in my immediate vicinity. Why buy them, right? Again, it's these mental justifications. That's another point here that ties into that psychological justification for why you should have this in your house, for why you should buy it, for why, oh, it's for the kids. Okay, so you want your kids to eat that type of food? I don't understand the justification, right? Oh, you got to live your life. That's fine. You can justify it with things like that if you so choose. However, keep in mind that does play a role in terms of sticking to the math long enough to actually just come out with the formulaic equation to make sure that you get as lean as you want, as fast as you want. Next is identity. So all these things, your psychological justification ties into your identity. Maybe you're afraid to be somebody that doesn't have chocolate in the house or this candy in the house, or who does have it like that. It's the same thing opposite way, but one way helps you achieve the goals, another may not. It really depends on your goal as well, right? Like maybe you don't want to get 7% body fat. That's totally fine. Maybe you don't want to achieve the best physique you possibly can. You just want a bit of a better one, and that's all. Totally fine. These all play into that as well. Past experience and coaches. If you had a terrible experience with a past coach that really ruined your perspective on things, they cut your calories way too low, they didn't know what they were doing, that can definitely have you vulnerable to the misinformation once again, right? Broke your perception of how things should be, less holistic. And lastly, confusion in social media. This is an obvious one. If you're one of these people that just get blown around the wind and you just want something that's sexy and easy to understand, you're not all that committed to your goals, then the harsh reality is you're going to fall for this stuff, and you might see a couple of results having you even more solidified that this is actually the truth, when the data, the anecdotes, and the simple science behind it all shows the opposite if your goal is maximum physique, health, and all the benefits that come with it long term. So with all that said, you have to understand these points. The math is the math at the end of the day, but it's a lot more than just the math. It's all the things underneath. You start to optimize these one by one, it's going to go a long way. And by the way, if you want to skip years of trial and error of doing this, you want to get in a place mentally healthy as well to understand things better, stop getting confused and thrown around left, right, and center, have actual clear instructions that are easy to follow, easy to adhere to, enjoyable, help you see results predictably, and are clearly backed by all the data of the modern day and constantly being updated by that standard, then make sure that you click the link below to check out the Modern Physique Hub, where I'm going to help optimize everything for you and along with you along that. And we even are running challenges, all that kind of cool stuff. And you can join for $1.56 a day or less, which has to be the best rate on the internet. You are oftentimes paying $500 to $1,000 per month for a coach that might just fuck you up in the process anyways. Whereas I'm bringing to you more value and results than these coaches do for a fraction of the cost. So make sure you lock in the price. Join today. Click the link in the description below. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or any other topics, if you liked this video and you want to see more things like this, please let me know down below. Don't forget to subscribe as well so you stay up to date on the content that is coming out soon. I appreciate you so much for watching. Hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm out.